Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely massive, the ultimate living, breathing contract between you, the citizen, and the state. We're talking about the Indian Constitution. Now, this isn't just some dusty old rulebook. We are literally decoding the DNA of the world's largest democracy. It shapes everything. From the rights you use every single day to how the highest offices in the land actually work. So buckle up, because we're going to break down this gigantic framework into a story that you will actually remember.
470. Yeah, that's the number of articles currently sitting in the Constitution. Sounds completely overwhelming, right? Kind of like trying to memorize an entire encyclopedia. But hey, don't sweat it. You honestly don't need to know all 470 to understand how your country runs. My promise to you today is simple. We're going to filter out all the noise and just simplify the absolute most crucial parts into a framework that actually makes sense for your daily life.
So, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the citizen's shield, then move to guiding the state and the citizen's role. After that, we'll pop the hood on the engine of governance, figure out surviving a crisis, and finally, I'm going to give you a master trick to lock this whole thing into your memory for good. Let's get into it.
Section 1. The Citizen's Shield. This is all about your fundamental rights.
Okay, so these fundamental rights are tucked right into Part 3 of the Constitution, and they are literally your direct shield against the government. If these get broken, you can march straight to the higher courts. These articles are all about leveling the playing field. For instance, Article 14 guarantees equality before the law. Basically, the rules are the same whether you're a billionaire or flat broke. Article 15 says absolutely no discrimination based on religion, race, caste, sex, or where you were born, though it does allow special rules to help uplift women, kids, and historically disadvantaged groups. Then you've got Article 16, which ensures equal opportunity in government jobs. Article 17 is a huge one. It completely abolishes the practice of untouchability, making it a strict crime. And finally, the big one, Article 21. This protects your actual life and personal liberty, meaning nobody can strip away your life or dignity without a proper legal procedure. Actually, this is the exact same article where our modern right to privacy comes from.
Now, let's look at Article 19, because this is where your personal liberty really takes off. This one single article hands you 6 massive freedoms. Ready? 1. Freedom of speech and expression. 2. The freedom to assemble peacefully. 3. To form associations or unions. 4. To move freely anywhere across the country. 5. To live anywhere in India. And 6. The freedom to practice any profession or run a business. But, and this is a big but, these aren't just blank checks. The government can put reasonable restrictions on them, mostly for stuff like national security and public order.
But honestly, what good is a shield if you can't actually use it? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar hit the nail on the head when he called Article 32 the soul of the Constitution. He was spot on. Article 32 is your constitutional remedy. Think of it as a direct hotline to the Supreme Court. If any of those rights we just talked about get violated, Article 32 lets you skip the lower courts entirely and demand immediate justice right from the top. It's the ultimate backup for your shield.
Moving on to Section 2, guiding the state through what's known as directive principles.
All right, so we know citizens are well protected. But what is the government actually trying to achieve? That's where Part 4 comes in. The directive principles. And this is a perfect example of how the Constitution balances things out. On one hand, you have your fundamental rights from Part 3, right? Those are legally enforceable. You can sue over them. On the other hand, Part 4's directive principles are, well, they're just guidelines. You can't drag the government to court if they failed to do these things. They're more like moral obligations or big-picture goals. They essentially paint a picture of what a perfect, welfare-driven India should look like down the road.
And here is the blueprint for that ideal India. You've got Article 38, which tells the state to promote public welfare and shrink income inequality. Article 39A is super important. It ensures free legal aid for the poor, so justice isn't just a luxury for the rich. Article 40 mandates village panchayats, which literally laid the foundation for the Panchayati Raj system. Then there's Article 44. You hear about this one in the news all the time, the goal of creating a uniform civil code for everyone. Article 48A focuses on protecting the environment and wildlife. And zooming way out, Article 51 directs the state to promote international peace. So yeah, these are the big targets the government is always aiming for.
Let's flip it back to you with Section 3, the citizen's role and fundamental duties.
Because, let's face it, a contract works both ways. Back in 1976, Article 51A was added, giving us 11 fundamental duties. We won't go through all of them, but let's highlight the top 3. First up, every citizen has got to abide by the Constitution and respect the national flag and anthem. Pretty standard. Second, you are duty-bound to defend the country. If you're called upon to do national service, like joining the armed forces, you have to step up.
And third, this was added a bit later, but it's absolutely crucial. If you are a parent or guardian, it is your duty to provide education opportunities for your kids between the ages of 6 and 14. Rights are great, but these duties, they're what actually hold society together.
All right, Section 4, the engine of governance. Let's see how this machine actually runs.
If we lift the hood on the day-to-day government, it is incredibly detailed. Article 52 sets up the president as the head of the country. But if you look at Articles 74 and 75, the real power actually sits with the Prime Minister. The PM is appointed by the president, but the president pretty much has to act on the advice of the PM and their ministers. You see the exact same dynamic at the state level with Articles 153 and 163 between the governor and the chief minister. Then we have the legislative tricks, like Article 110, which defines a money bill. This can only be introduced in the Lok Sabha, which seriously limits the Rajya Sabha's power over the country's wallet. And check out Article 123. This lets the president pass an ordinance, basically making laws when Parliament is on a break, though it does have to be approved within 6 weeks once they're back in session.
Holding all of this together are what we can call the vital pillars. Article 1 comes right out of the gate declaring India as a union of states, meaning the country cannot just be broken apart. Article 72 gives the president the wild power to grant pardons, literally commuting death sentences. Article 124 builds the Supreme Court, the ultimate watchdog. Article 280 sets up the Finance Commission every 5 years to figure out how tax money gets split between the central government and the states. Article 324 creates the Election Commission to run elections across this massive nation. And, super importantly, Article 368 gives us the amendment process, because a living document has to evolve, right? Though any major changes need a thumbs up, not just from Parliament, but from half the states, too.
Which brings us to Section 5, Surviving Crisis Through Emergency Provisions.
Okay, so what happens when things go really, really wrong? When the normal rules just aren't enough to keep the country glued together? Just pause and think about that for a second. What happens when the system itself is threatened? When the survival of the nation or its finances or the whole government machinery in a state just completely collapses? How does a democracy hit the panic button without accidentally destroying itself?
Well, the answer lies in 3 very specific constitutional fail-safes. First is Article 352, the national emergency. This gets triggered by war, external attacks, or armed rebellion. It centralizes a terrifying amount of power, and yeah, it was famously used back in 1975. Next up is Article 356, which you've probably heard called President's Rule. If a state government totally fails to run by the book, the central government can basically step in and take over for a bit. And finally, Article 360, the financial emergency. This is for when the economic stability of India is severely threatened. And honestly, thank goodness, this is one failsafe we have never actually had to use.
All right, take a breath. Section 6, the master trick. Time to memorize this framework.
We have covered a lot. Rights, guidelines, duties, emergencies. So here is the ultimate cheat code to lock this architecture into your brain forever. Ready? Step 1. Articles 14 to 32. That's your freedom. It's your shield against the government. Step 2. Articles 36 to 51. That's the state's job. It's the roadmap for what the government should be doing for you. Step 3. Article 51A. That's our job, our basic duties giving back to the nation. And Step 4. Articles 352, 356, and 360. Those are the 3 major threats, the emergency buttons for when things go totally sideways. Freedom, state's job, our job, and threats. Just remember that simple little story, and you've basically mastered the core DNA of the Indian Constitution.
And that right there is the pure genius of this document. But keep in mind, the law doesn't just sit there quietly on a page. It lives, it breathes, and it fights it out in the courts. Take Article 21, that right to life and liberty we talked about. It's been at the absolute center of some of the most dramatic, history-making legal battles in India. So I'll leave you with this. Which famous Article 21 court case should we decode in our next explainer? Let me know. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time as we keep unpacking the forces that shape our world.